Today, we're getting under the hood of Lisa Kaenzig, a mother, daughter, sister, partner, college dean, and champion for educational and leadership opportunities for girls and women. Lisa shares her passion for women's leadership in her role as Dean of William Smith College at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, HWS. Lisa has over 30 years of administrative and academic experience, including several years working in politics in Washington, D.C., and more than 2 decades serving as a college dean. She is the chair of the Advisory Council for the Public Leadership Educational Network, PLEN, a national organization with the sole focus of empowering, educating, and engaging women and marginalized gender groups in public policy to promote diverse, inclusive leadership in policymaking. Lisa has a deep commitment to DEIA work. She founded the HWS First Generation Initiative to provide support and resources for students who are the first in their families to graduate from college. She was appointed to serve in leadership roles on the President's Committee on Inclusive Excellence and the Strategic Diversity Plan Committee. Lisa has also appeared on NPR and the BBC to discuss her research on introversion and high-ability learners. Lisa earned her PhD in Educational Policy, Planning, and Leadership from William & Mary, her MA in Human Resource Development from the George Washington University, and her BA in Political Science from Rutgers University. Wow, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I am delighted to be with you today. I am a huge fan of Under the Sisterhood and so glad to be connected with you and the other amazing women from all over the world represented in this really special organization. So I couldn't be happier to be a part of this.
Really excited to share your story today, Lisa. And if it's okay, let's get going.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of other women, my path was not linear. But you look back now, and I've heard some of the other podcasts, amazing women that you've interviewed talk about this, that you look back and you can connect the dots. And I think for me, there's some major themes in my life and some key points in my story. So I'll share a few of those. I think most significantly, I was really born curious, but particularly about people. And I was really fortunate. I attended an international school for my primary education, and the real focus there was following your own interests and your passions. So even as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, I can remember being taught, how to kind of control my own emotions, how to engage in the work, as it was called there, how to trust my own instincts, and even to find my own voice. And so I think that was really important. I'm an extrovert. Both my parents are extroverts, but we also moved a lot when I was young. And so I had to find a way to quickly connect with new people at schools and our neighborhoods and communities. And that made me nervous, of course, like would any child. And I realized that an easy strategy to kind of calm my own nerves was to kind of quickly get to know other people. And that the best way to do that was asking them questions about themselves. And you understand that well, as the leader of a great podcast. And people really like to talk about themselves and help people who are new to their community. That was certainly my experience, again, moving many times as a child. And so what's really stayed with me is how important it is to make new people in communities feel welcome and that they belong. And so that's been a big part for me. But another thing I think was my mother went back to school when I was very young, when I was in elementary school. She went back to complete her undergraduate degree at a small liberal arts college near where we lived. And I was 8 years old when she graduated from college, and my younger sister was 5. And I still remember that day so vividly. And there were so many days when my mom would have to take us into her classes because we had a school day off work or, weren't feeling well or something. And I remember noticing a couple of things early on that have clearly shaped the trajectory of my life. One was that my mother was in a male-dominated field, which I wouldn't have understood the language for at the time, but she was one of the only women, if not the only woman, in many of her classes. And this was in the 1970s. And she also was, even though pretty young at the time, now as I look back, she was definitely one of the older students. She might have been the only returning student to that school. And so watching my mom in this male-dominated major, but getting support from faculty and my own father who supported her journey, I think that really made me interested in experiencing and researching successful women in male-dominated fields, as well as people whose experiences were really different from my own. And then my mom actually later returned for her PhD. And I remember it's one of my clearest memories as a teenager was that I was 17 and my younger sister was 14 when my mom walked across that stage and got her doctoral degree. And I remember my sister and I just hugging each other and crying and being so proud of her. And it really felt like we'd all kind of grown up together. And my mother now has been a professor, still teaching at a business school at a major university for over 35 years. But she was 40 years old when she got her doctoral degree. And I think that was just such a big early influence on me and my work moving forward.
I'm really curious because I know that you've done research on, introverts and high ability learners. Talk, if you could share a little bit about.
Yeah, it was actually my PhD at William and Mary. I ended up just continually encouraged by faculty, both as an undergraduate, but then in my master's program, which was at George Washington, to go and get a doctorate. And having watched my mother do that as a teenager, I wasn't so sure that I wanted to do that. But eventually, I did end up at William and Mary. And even though I had not taken a single education course in college, I ended up entering their doctoral program in educational policy with a special concentration in gifted education. And so I was able to kind of combine my interest in high ability learners and especially girls and women and what the impact of their career choices were. But part of my job as a doctoral student was to go into classrooms in Virginia, they have gifted and talented classrooms and kind of do a checklist of what makes a great teacher of high ability learners. And so I was doing these checklists, but what I was realizing was that many of the teachers had these wonderful extroverted, charismatic personalities through these really colorful rooms. And I mean, it was exactly the kind of teacher you would hope for your child that they would have. And I'm checking away at this checklist, that we're doing as doctoral students. But I started to notice that many of the students in the room, and these were primarily elementary and middle school classrooms, were not the same personality type as the teacher. And I didn't even have the words for what that was. But I was looking at the teacher thinking, that's a personality more similar to my own, extroverted, talking with their hands, the whole thing, talking fast. And the students in the room, many of them were clearly kind of off reading a book in a corner or deeply focused on a particular project and almost seemed overwhelmed by all of that high energy. And so I went back and talked with another faculty member at William and Mary. And she said, well, those are introverts. Those are introverts. And what we know about the literature is that about 75% of high achieving people were introverts. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that word. And so she sent me over to the library. Back in the days, you were still to go to the library to do all your research. And I started learning about this, and we wrote a paper together, and it got picked up. And then, it got picked up by the Atlantic and all these other things. And it still is wild to me that when you Google me, one of the main things that comes up is how often cited that early article is. And I've since spoken on the BBC, on one of their podcasts, to NPR, been around the world talking with teachers about really important strategies to learn to help gifted, introverted kids. And it actually helps all kids. So it's great for everybody. But sometimes for me, I've said this before, but I feel a bit like a cultural anthropologist going into a culture so different from my own, because I am quite the raging extrovert. I'm known for my high energy and my extroversion. And so to be learning from children, from young adults, and even from my colleagues who are more introverted, which many university faculty are, kind of the different way they see the world. And so that's been really a theme through my life, is kind of looking at groups of people who have a different life experience than my own and learning from them and then sharing what I've learned.
I could relate to it in some ways. Sometimes I show up and I have to be an extrovert for the job, but then I need to go and refuel and, so that you can create.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we all need time to refuel. And I think that's kind of part of the wellness journey, right? For all of us. And I've watched as a dean needing to model that for my students, right? Openly model that. So when I first moved to Geneva, where Hobart Williams is located, my children, my daughters were 3 and 4 years old. And it was a lot trying to figure it all out. And one thing I realized early on, which I think almost every other working parent knows, is there is no balance. It's just about where your energy and your focus goes. And I had read a great quote by the then female president of Princeton University saying, when I'm at work, I'm fully immersed in work, and I have great people who are helping to take care of my children who I trust. And then when I'm with my children, I'm fully with my children. And that has worked for me at times. But one of the things I realized early in my work, particularly with young women, was how important it was for them to see that I was a mother and that my children are very important to me, but also for my children to see my work and see how important that was to me. And so I would often bring them along. There are many pictures of them twirling around, as 4 and 5-year-olds at some big, event I'm speaking at with 500 people outside, twirling around outside a tent, hearing me speaking to students, hearing me give the messages to young women that I wanted to give. And my children were able to see that I find such joy in my work. But my students, really importantly to me, were also able to see how much joy I take in having my children. That my children have grown up, in Geneva and on this campus. One of them ended up going to school here, the other one at another women's college. They only looked at small liberal arts colleges. And I think part of that was the experience they saw kind of growing up here and how important that was to them. But modeling for students how we have multiple things in our lives that bring us joy and are important to us, I think has been a really big part of my now almost 21 years of being a college dean.
It's very interesting for, I think, kind of our generation. I might be a little older than you, is one of those things is really balancing. There is no balance. You're absolutely right. It's really knowing how to use your energy at what times appropriately. So I think you described that just perfectly. I don't know if there's anything that you want to.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I think there was a book I read, and I know there was a book I read in college that I think had such an important influence in my life. And I recommend it to everyone, even though it was published in 1989. It's written by Mary Catherine Bateson. It's called Composing a Life. I read it as a part of a women's studies course at my undergraduate institution. I went to Douglas College, which is the women's college at Rutgers, for my undergraduate degree, which was profoundly impactful on me. And I've reread this book probably every 3 or 4 years over the course of my life. And Mary Catherine Bateson was a writer, a professor, a cultural anthropologist. And she wrote this great book, Composing a Life, about how women have to reinvent themselves all the time, and that their lives are really about improvisation, and that it's really an art form to do that. And it's something that should be celebrated. And I just loved that. And I think that was the beginnings of my lifelong now curiosity about the way that women and even girls from an early age are thinking about their lives and careers and all the different mosaic of their life that they really want to have. And I think it just completely shaped the way I think about my work, the way I've thought about my life, the way I've thought about raising my own daughters. It's been a deeply impactful book for me, and I give it constantly away as gifts because, again, and it's so funny to me, Elizabeth, because I think she wrote it in like her early 50s. And here I am as like a 20-year-old reading it in college thinking, my God, these women she's talking about are so old, And here I am now at that same age. But I'm constantly thinking, how can I reinvent myself? How can I be thinking differently about my own work and my own life? And how can I model that very openly for young women? It's very important to me.
But the effects and the power, the importance of doing it for women, because they have not had that as the modeling, like really intentionally up until I would say more recently. The power you have and what you're doing has been truly transformational. I'd love for you to share some of the work you're doing. Well, first of all, let's talk about what you're doing on campus as a dean.
As a dean, I meet, obviously with a lot of students all the time, mostly young women and sometimes others as well, of course. But kind of talking to them about their journey, their academic journey here at the colleges, what they're thinking they want to do, helping often to kind of hold a proverbial mirror up to them. I feel like kind of my secret special, secret power or something is this ability to kind of hold a mirror up to people. It's usually students, but sometimes it's my colleagues and others in my life, and say, here's what I see in you. Here's what I think your strengths are. One of my students said, you saw the sparkle in me. And I always think about that. What is the thing the student is really saying to me from their body language, from the way they talk about what they smile about? What are the things that are clearly drawing their interests? So I might have someone who comes in and says, well, since I was 12, Dean Kaenzig, I wanted to be a doctor. That's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm in chemistry and biology. But I really want to talk to you about my international relations class and my French class. And then they just light up talking about those. And I say, look, if your journey and what you want to do is still become a doctor, I'm 100% with you. I need to show you, though, again, holding up that mirror, here's what I'm seeing and hearing. Your face is lighting up around international relations or French or whatever it might be. I need to tell you that that's what I'm seeing and hearing from you. And so I think a lot of my job is kind of talent development, saying, here's what I'm seeing in you. Here are the things that seem interesting to you. And as a manager and as a colleague, I'm constantly looking for what are the things that seem to bring joy to my staff, to other people that that I'm working with all the time, because I work with people all across campus. Like, I'm constantly letting them know, here's what I'm seeing in you that you maybe want to lean even more into to be doing as a part of your work, whether it's in my office or in another office. And something else I've been doing for 12 or 13 years now, I'm so lucky. I get to hear from many students every day about their experiences here at HWS. And they're always talking about my colleagues and how helpful someone was in residential education or in the leadership center or in admissions, like admissions counselor who brought them and has tracked them all the way through. And I will call or email someone almost every single day and say, I want you to know, Elizabeth, that the student was just in my office and she was raving about you and what an important impact you've made. And I think that's a big part of my job now, especially after so many years here, is to be a community builder. So not only do I love the work and the time I get to spend with students and helping them on their journey, but I also see a lot of my work as in encouraging my colleagues, particularly women, but not all, to see the impact that they have on these young people's lives. It's a transformational time in your life when you were in college. I know it was for me. I've seen it for my own daughters. I've seen it for almost 21 years of students here at Hobart and William Smith. And so reminding all the people that work here about the impact that they have, our faculty, our staff, colleagues, folks who check people in at the dining hall, that they really matter and they make such a difference in these young people's lives.
When people
Yes.
feel seen and heard and that they matter to you, that they matter, you're building a better culture. You're building a school where, first of all, your staff, professors want to stay at a place like this. They want to bring joy because you're creating the joy for them. You're showing them. And it's not something to be taken lightly. It's like you are the lighthouse for them. And being that leader who does that. And then the joy that by seeing and hearing the students and by saying, in a way, while you're holding up that mirror, you're not telling the student, don't become a doctor. You're saying, I see more joy in you here by what you're saying.
Yes.
You really, life is full of wonderful opportunities. You are sharing with them the impact that they're having by writing them. I'm sharing with you, hearing this story and letting you know that the impact you're having on thousands of lives, 21 years of doing that. You're not just impacting the students, you're impacting the culture of your school. So I'm really curious. You've done so much in your life academically. There's work you've done as a leader and really looking at gender. Can you talk about the work at PLEN?
Yeah. So part of the reason that I went to Douglas at Rutgers was that they had a PLEN chapter there, and PLEN is the Public Leadership Education Network. It's almost 50 years old now. It's headquartered in Washington, DC, which when I was in college as a political science major and a women's studies minor, that's where I wanted to be after school. And I did do that and worked in politics in the early part of my career. But PLEN, there was a very involved chapter when I was at Douglas College at Rutgers of young women who are interested in politics and public policy from every angle. It could be STEM, it could be, just campaign politics, it could be healthcare. You pretty much can name the thing, and PLEN's a part of that. And the PLEN organization in Washington has seminars throughout the year that young women and marginalized gender groups, college students can come to from all over the country, and they do. And they host them on, healthcare careers, or again, STEM careers, or there's one at the end of this year on international policy, careers in global policy. And they're talking about global health and almost every single thing you can imagine related to those sorts of careers. And because I knew I wanted to go into politics, I was at that point interested in working in kind of campaign politics and helping elect women to office. I had a lot of connections through the PLEN program when I was in college. I also was very fortunate at Rutgers. The Center for the American Woman in Politics is located there at the Eagleton Institute of Politics, which is internationally known place. And I was really lucky to get connected with the folks, the great women who work at COP, it's called CAWP. And they brought me in. I was an intern for them. I got to meet all these amazing women, and they were just terrific role models and mentors for me. And one of the women who had started COP, who had started the Center for the American Women in Politics, Ruth Mandel, who was an extraordinary person. She also had to help start PLEN. So there was just this wonderful synergy between the two. And then after I moved to Washington, I helped in the PLEN office there in DC. I helped them get started with a new event that they still have to this day called the Mentor Awards. And that was in 1994 when I was working in Washington as a young, just post-college graduate, and helped them with some grant writing and different things like that, but also spoke at a lot of the seminars, helping young women who were coming to the seminars from all over the country and a few from all over the world, learn about how to network in Washington, how if they wanted to move there and get a job, how they could do that, what things had worked for me, and kind of had become a master networker at that point. Part of what I love about Under the Sisterhood is this amazing network you're building of all these extraordinary women. And I just feel very privileged to be a part of that now. And then when I did come to William Smith, after a few years of being here, we started a PLEN chapter. So there are chapters at colleges all over the country, and my students have a very active leadership group here on campus that's a part of PLEN. We host speakers who come to campus. We have several coming next week, actually, for International Women's Day. And we send a lot of students to the seminars, and it's a very well-known and impactful program here at HWS, and I'm super proud of it.
Curious on with the marginalized groups. What is PLEN doing for that? And are you doing anything as it relates to that at HWS?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first started PLEN, it was PLEN at William Smith College, right? The female identifying part of Hobart and William Smith. And they work very closely together and have a wonderful history and relationship. But this was a special leadership program for women. And that's what PLEN's mission in Washington, the national organization's mission, was at the time. I served as for a period of time on the board, I think 7 or 8 years on the board of directors and several years as the vice chair and then the chair of the board. And during that time, we were having conversations about expanding the mission to include marginalized gender groups, students who are non-binary, identify in a different way than solely, female or male identifying. And I've seen that on the front lines at college. I've learned so much from the students who identify in that way. I think it's a really important thing to be inclusive of all of those students. And so when the PLEN National Group, which based after a lot of conversations and discussions, when we made the decision to shift the mission to be more inclusive, we made that same shift here. So now instead of PLEN at William Smith College, it's PLEN at HWS. So all of our students feel welcome and included. And I think that has just done nothing but add to the power of the PLEN experience for our students.
From that perspective, it's very PLEN focused, or you look at DE&I? Because I know in your introduction, you're a leader in that on your college campus. What would you say?
Yeah, it's very important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think going to an international school when I was very young with teachers who came from all different countries. I had teachers from Sri Lanka, India, New Zealand, and kids from all over the world, from all different diverse backgrounds. Again, at the time, I don't think as a young person I would have understood that, but it really did help me understand that I had a broader worldview. My mother had also grown up with a dad in the Air Force and had lived all over the world growing up. And then my father and his work traveled a lot globally. So I was always very aware of kind of different perspectives of experiences and different perspectives and points of view. And so that's been very important to me. In my current family of creation, I guess you would call it, the family I have created, I am the only one who was born in the United States. Both of my children, my daughters, were born in other countries. My partner is from another country. So they're all immigrants in one form or another to the United States. And so that also has shaped my thinking about the experience of different people and different perspectives. When I was a young dean here, I started our First Generation Initiative, which is for students who are the first in their family to go to college. So even though that wasn't my lived experience, I've noticed how important that is. And when we started that in 2006, about 8 or 9% of HWS students identified as first generation. And now I think it's closer to 21 to 24% of our students identify as first generation going to college. And so that's something that I saw again different experience from my own, but one where I saw a need, and we created something really special here for that, and something we're well known for now. A recent chair of our board of trustees was First Generation, and he's given great gifts to help support the First Generation Initiative at HWS. So I think another theme as I look back on my life is thinking through where is there need that's again different from my own viewpoint or perspective, and how to kind of create that. And so that's led a lot of my DEIA or B, depending on where you are. Some people talk about access, others belonging. I think both are really important and a part of that experience, and that has been a through line throughout my career, certainly.
If you don't go through that experience, you don't understand that people sit, and there are a lot of feelings and different identities that come with that. And so I think by creating that environment that acknowledges it, and it gives it a safe space to have a conversation, and it's actually a really cool thing. There's so much pride in that.
Yeah, I think it all relates to helping people find their own voices, right? And that's especially hard for girls, young women,
Yeah.
marginalized gender groups, first generation students, sometimes introverts, obviously. And and I feel like it's a huge part of my job is to kind of help them so they can build that confidence that will help them throughout their lives to believe in themselves, to understand their own capacities, and to then share that voice later in their life when it can be really hard. You and I both know that, and help them understand that they belong. They belong at every table in every career area, and just how critical that is as a part of my daily job. I mean, the greatest joy for me is if a student comes into my office and they're struggling with something, trying to figure something out. There are two things I really want to do. One is just help them think about the next step. They always want to think 20 years from now or 10 years from now. And I explain to them, I can't even think that way. All I'm thinking about is what is my next step? And that seems to help them a lot. Like, what's the next thing you need to do? The other is I want them to feel better when they leave my office than when they come in. And there is nothing better than seeing a young person who came in upset, worried, stressed, having whatever is going on with them that's giving them, a lot of anxiety, having them walk out with their back held higher, looking more confident, and knowing what the next thing is they need to do. And that's just the most amazing thing and the best part of my job.
As we come to a close, I have a great question, or a question I think is great, which is, this is your platform to give a message to women all around the world, of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all cultures. What do you say to them, Lisa?
Well, I think one thing is just take risks, be brave. Like I said at the beginning, I'm deeply curious about lots of things, but especially about people. And I think brave curiosity is really important. But to do that, you need to find a safe place where you feel willing to take those risks, and finding other people, especially I think women, to support you and that you can support. I think mentoring has been, without question, one of my favorite things, whether it's mentoring young people or colleagues. But I think finding just joy in the everyday things. And I know we're talking a lot about wellness, and like I said earlier, I've kind of reconnected to the things that made me happier, that I wanted to achieve as a young person. I've been writing more. I've been finding great people to partner with to write. I've been making new friends. I've been making a point of making new friends. Even though I've been in the same place for 21 years, I really love making new friends. I've gotten back to swimming in my life, which was a joy for me as a competitive swimmer growing up. And I've gotten back into not the competitive part, but the swimming almost every morning. And my actual younger daughter has got me into meditation. And so I'm meditating every night and in the morning. And I've found how much it really centers me, because I don't think I can be a good model for young women of a leader and an empathetic person if I'm not showing that same empathy to myself and that same concern to myself. So I think I would just say to other women, find the things that bring you joy, find mentors, be mentors to other people, believe in yourself. And when that group of friends and colleagues says to you, here's what your strengths are, here's what we see on you, believe them, and just really find those things that bring you joy and make you feel really fulfilled, and stay connected to other people, and remember your core values, what matters most to you. It's amazing to me looking back on my life now, and this privilege of having this opportunity with you, Elizabeth, to share my story. and how consistent my core values have been from those elementary school, early, important, critical years, all the way through to who I am now. It's just been, remarkably consistent, and kind of holding firm to your own truth, I think is very important, and just lean all the way into who you already are.
We don't realize the power we have, and you're just doing extraordinary things for young women, bringing up the next generation, and really not just saying but really showing them the way. So congratulations, and thank you so much for getting under the hood with me today.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for having me, for having this sisterhood. I've been sending links to people all over the place to listen to the podcast and be a part of the webinars. I'm just so grateful to you for being such a founder, and you being brave and creating something new. And I so appreciated the opportunity to share my story, and I'm grateful to be a part of your wonderful community.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.